Hello, Steven. Um,
Hey,
Today we're talking with Steven de Costa. He's co-steward for CKAN, founder for Link Digital, the company that builds open data infrastructure around the world, data portals, solves data challenges. We know each other for quite a while, had many fantastic conversations. I have a sense that it might be interesting. So stay with us. Stephen, the first question is about how you got interested in open data. What are roots of you in all this?
yeah, it was with a lot of questions and challenges. I didn't quite know why. I did economics at university, and then started Link Digital 2001, just being a bit geeky and building stuff with HTML and doing all sorts of things. Based in Canberra, so like a government town here in Australia. But then in 2012, this opportunity emerged where we could build something for the federal government, data.gov.au. We did it with CKAN, but immediately I kind of connected to the economics of it, like this non-rivalrous information good thing that is open data. And I also connected just to the kind of evidence-based policy promise that comes from this, that government agencies need to do stuff for the people. It should be transparent, should be accountable, should be refutable, should be all these things. So something like CKAN as a tool, something like open data as a commodity, as it were, just made a lot of like natural sense to me. That's how I got interested, and I had a lot of questions as to why I was interested, because back then I was thinking about making money, providing services, having clients, having a defensible niche, all this kind of stuff, doing amazing things with digital technologies, producing amazing digital experiences, all that kind of stuff. And I had a lot of curiosity about how open data could be connected into that kind of business model type thing as well.
Super interesting how you made this connection with being from Canberra, and it's a government town, and Link Digital provides for governments. So we know there are contracts in Canada, in Australia, in many parts of the world. And does it help you being in a government town? So you mentioned HTML, curiosity, agency, and all that stuff, and that governments should provide. But you also was in the government town in Australia. How it helped you? Are there any experiences you can recall, maybe?
I don't know if it helps in any particular way, except for the fact that once you're close to people who work in government, you actually know, it's not quite the truth of things, but the challenges beneath the things. So there's no perfect policy, there's no perfect bureaucracy, but then there are so many people working towards perfection in each of those areas, right? And they're real people. And the organizational learning and intent behind these things that we call ministries and government agencies and public programs and public projects, like they're real things, right? So it's not like these things happenstance together and they emerge through some sort of like belligerence and some sort of like weirdness. Like there are real things making these come together, and these programs become part of our societies, right? So I think the key thing that is a benefit of being in a government town, which is kind of like very proximal and known to you, and you grow up with it, is that you don't believe the shadows that can be cast upon government, right? There's no conspiracy, there's no crazy talk, there's no sort of like weird inefficiencies going on in government. There's just normal human behavior, normal human structures, normal human processes embedded as best as we can into like process, procedures, technologies, bureaucracies. That's basically it, right? So yeah, the benefit is you don't subscribe to the otherness of government. You kind of have a really close understanding that it's real, it has challenges. But at the same time, you're in a position where you can see the real challenges of government as well, like what it's trying to do and how it's not quite doing it perfectly all the time. Yeah.
That's interesting. So actual evidence, seeing the people, listening to the actual people who are working there, demystifying all that stuff, being close to the actual work on the ground. Yeah, I think it's simply fantastic. Great. I would like to get us closer to what is happening right now. And not that easy times for openness around the world. What are your personal concerns about existential challenges facing open data right now?
Yeah, well, so existential challenges. There's a challenge that's been looming on the cloudy horizons for a long time, which is the lack of demand for open data will result in a lack of supply. The lack of demand and the lack of activation around the demand for open data and the intermediaries that might supply insights and beneficial outcomes from open data, the lack of market, I guess, that can operate on open data, will, again, ultimately result in a lack of supply. If we don't have a burning need to pull forth from our government institutions, from our corporate entities, from our public offices and social contracts and all sorts of things, this sort of manifest record of what reality is with regard to how those things operate, and we don't have like an impact that comes from that, the supply will dry out. So demand generation or activating demands, connecting the concept of what open data is and what it can provide to people, for people, is has at least since 2018 been one of the things that's driven me. I think there's a really strong purpose-driven push for open data from like 2009 with the Obama administration to various iterations of various policy type interactions with civic society, civil society. The various programs built, various applications built, various technologies built, all the way through to 2016, 2017. But then, I don't know, 2018, at least for me, it's not quite the penny drops. Like there's many really great public data programs and public data artifacts, products, jurisdictional portals, etc. But for me, it just meant we're at a playing field where the expectation has met the reality or the supply, and there's so much more potential there. There's so much more sort of like structure within what could be formed from open data, and yet the structure's not there, the fabric's not there, the control or the value operations are not there. So the question of how do we generate demand? How do we connect in what open data can provide into the facilities that would provide that value? That's the challenge.
Okay. If it's a funnel between people in government are making decision to finance open data initiatives or nonprofits or any other type of organizations, and then the end person gets the benefit, and it's a whole chain of decisions, solutions, procurement. Where do you see leaks in this funnel, and where maybe you have a sense how these leaks can be fixed, or where we should kind of work on them to bypass them, or like how to fix the funnel?
Yeah, so like there's
a question I came up right away. So please take your time.
No, it's fine. I'm just trying to work out so the best way for me to answer that is from the passion that I feel around what data can actually be right now and the way that knowledge can be created in context. So we move from things like raw data to structured data, right? To information, to knowledge, to wisdom. Wisdom being the application of knowledge artifacts towards like a beneficial outcome, let's say. So we act with intent upon knowledge that we might have gathered, that intended purpose, right? So for me, this idea of what open data should be doing for us and how we can work with it better in our societies, it really comes down to that raw data starting point. So the observability of our societies, the observability of ourselves, if you break that down to like the core like founding parts of it, it's like intent, it's agency, it's action. And to what extent we're able to make those things observable, not quite quantize them, but at least make them measurable, such that those measurements, those data, that raw data, can feed into something that's constructive and constructed by our own intent, by our own collective intent. So if you were thinking about a government context, you have a government agency, has a government program or an intent to create a particular public outcome, right? What's the raw data that's observable that can feed into that to authentically deliver that intent, that outcome? And yeah, that's the thing that sort of drives me at the moment.
I see.
On top of, doing
Yeah.
open data portals.
So it's a vision plus economy, kind of how it can work, why it's important, why the open data is important. So it's a narrative to spread. It's the ideas to share.
I think it's like crossing over from this concept of open data, which is like a transformation, going from closed data. This idea that data has its domain-specific context and should be controlled and like measured as valuable within that domain. We want to move to open data, transform it and say there's a public or an N+1 use case context or an accountability context. Or more recently, a trainability context. That should this data be released, it can be used for training models that are more authentically going to be for the public good, right? That is then changing this concept of open data to public interest data or public data, or public value data. And I think that's the area that I think is pretty important. And then the context of what the public is. So the public is not 8 billion people on this planet, right? Because the public and the way we interact and the way we have effects on each other. It's not just an informational network sort of context. We are all connected, potentially. Well, not quite 8 billion of us, right? But the ones online, the ones interconnected by our mobile devices, what we're attenuated to, we can interact, and that data can either set us free or it can constrain us. And again, open data, public interest data, or within our communities, the way we structure the release of data so it can be iteratively supported of our intents or our collective intents, the organizational structures, the objectives we have, the programs we want to initiate on, the kind of Bayesian approach, the way we want to improve on those systems. All of this, again, is, it's so amazing that we actually have like systems by which statistically we can start to understand how to do these things as well. So AI, not to give it, AI is like wood, right? It's a fabric or it's a construct upon which we can create new systems. But the way we then carve, structure, and sculpt that wood into our social systems and create social cohesion, or we support identities, or we support the disadvantaged so that they're not as disadvantaged and they're actually constructive members within our social systems and our other systems, right? Commercial, economic, social, political systems, emotional systems. All of this is fundamental to our selfhood and our humanity, right? All of this is possible now with data.
Yeah, true. Very practical question. So I'm recalling my experience. So I'm born in 85 and I'm Ukrainian. And it was a collapse of Soviet Union and huge crisis. Like on the ground, on the land, like people don't know what to do. Because the system where their fathers lived, grandfathers lived, they lived, is just collapsed and it's something new there. But before it's built, before all the social cues are polished and they are well functioning, all this network are combined again, it's just chaos, sort of. And I have a sense of a bit of a similarity to what happens right now. Now, not at the scale, because it's not the world system that breaks right now on our eye in front of us, but still some resemblance. And I can recall how fantastic this time was for new energy, new ideas, free from past sort of laws and restrictions. The question is, thank you for listening to this very long prompt. What emerging data management needs can Link Digital uniquely address in this changing situation?
Yeah, sure. So I'm not going to answer that question directly. I'm going to answer it through a story, right? And so what was going on for you in 1985 is different from me. So 1985, you're born. 1973, I was born. 1985, I was watching breakdance movie. Like, I think 1985 was the year of break. Like, New York was going off, and I thought that was pretty cool, right? So my semantic encoding of what our cultural history is and the things that entangled me through that history are very different to yours. You weren't even impressioned by 1985. And yet by 1985, I was already a kid. I was 12 years old. I was, thinking I could break. And I was impressionable by cultural influences that were going on at the time. Now that entanglement, semantic entanglement, you might say, was a learned experience. It was a culturally and experientially learned experience. We have that kind of capability with data right now, that we can actually learn models, create models that have the same sort of semantic entanglements as individuals, and then reflect back those entanglements in constructed scenarios that can create reasoned arguments with that kind of anchored perspective, right? So my answer is, when you came in an Eastern European country to be enabled to participate in the full Western civilization, the full Western sort of like, buoyancy of what can be done, what might be possible in a capitalist market, what empowerment might come from the full support of your civil liberties or your human rights, or the lessening of the encroachment of a surveillance state, right? Where you wouldn't want to be your true self. You would only reflect within your family and close familiars your true self, your intent, your actions, and your forming identities, right?
Absolutely.
But you can counter that and say, well, what's possible now is a different kind of moment. So I remember in 2002, I guess, I don't know when Facebook first came to Australia, but by the time it came to Australia, it was already a little bit matured. It rolled out pretty quickly globally. Went through its iterative stages in the colleges of the United States, right? Mm-hmm. Now, I had, as an individual, a social graph. I didn't even know what a knowledge graph was, right? But I had one. I had friends. I had lived experiences. By then, I'd gone through high school, I'd gone through college, and I'd gone through university. College in Australia is like year 11, year 12, right? Mm-hmm. And yet, if I wanted to know what Jeff is doing, and I kind of reflected on it on a Sunday morning when I woke up, I'd have to cognitively have that anchoring moment, wake up and think, I wonder what's Jeff's doing. Well, I'll talk to Sophia because I think she knows what Jeff's doing. I had to construct, form, and stay in touch with my social graph in that very normal way that everyone did back then, right? Yeah. So the transformation or the transition that occurred when we start to embed our social graph into a tool like Facebook, it made the ephemeral, it made the socially construed thing something we can interact with, something we can actually play with, and something that we could manipulate in different ways. Manipulate positively, but also manipulate within our own minds passively. I could wake up that Sunday, not at all do any of that hard work of talking to Sophia to find out what Jeff's doing, and I could just look online and say, oh yeah, there's a picture from Jeff, he's in Tanzania.
Yeah.
So my social graph is constructed and interoperable with myself. Myself is then anchored through that technology. I'm attenuated through that technology, and I'm empowered to some extent, or I'm disempowered from society to some extent because I no longer have to interact with society to know my social graph. I can stay in touch with Jeff for years, decades into the future without having to cultivate that relationship or stay in touch with that relationship. Now, I think right now we have the same sort of construct that's occurring. We have technology, we have models that can be learned upon our interactions, upon our data, upon the statistics sort of observance of us from the outside. And then they can reflect back to us, not just as social graph, but all sorts of knowledge graphs upon which we might want to interact with the world. What kind of agentified actions would we like to take? Mm-hmm. What kind of agency would we like to manifest from this kind of outside appearance of ourselves? Mm-hmm. And when others start to interact with us and connect with us in different ways, suppliers, customers, friends, family, all the hopes and dreams, abstract connections, right? Not just literal social graph type connections, but possibilities to learn new subjects, possibilities to travel to new places, possibility to buy new things and have a consumer hit from that dopamine fix, or possibilities to be engrossed in a particular application or dopamine-driven treadmill application, or to learn another language and be cultivated to just be addicted to the concept of learning languages. All these things are statistically, probabilistically part of how the outside world can see us.
Okay.
So how do we interoperate with that? And the way we do that is to actually kind of start to understand what public interest data is private interest data. Our private interest data is actually our intents, our wills, our statements of intent and statements of persona. My persona on a Sunday is very different to my persona on a hustle Monday. And we need to make ourselves interoperable in this kind of new paradigm. So I monologued. I don't know if I answered your question, but the whole narrative is part of the answer, right? So pick your spot where the answer might sit.
Yeah, questions are that dynamic thing, and they haven't supposed to be like very strict. It's more like, yeah, either we're having a good conversation or we're not. Kind of, this is how I feel about it. But you was talking about the shift from a pull economy based on trust to the push economy based on declaration of intent. May you please unroll this, unpack this ideas? What's pull economy? What's push economy? What's the difference?
Yeah. So I've been working on these ideas since 2018, and most intently and with most dedication, I guess, or focus since 21st of January. And there's no guess as to why. I'm pretty interested in working out how do we actually create societies or social structures, or even just like basic technologies, like I don't know, like a WooCommerce marketplace for selling Pokemon cards or trading Pokemon cards, right? And this concept of how do we trust people, And I think the idea is that currently in many of our systems, it's been embedded this construct that we have leaders or profiles or brands or some sort of archetypal mechanism, right? That anchors this concept of these are all my qualities, these are all my objectives, these are all my stated intents. And by these things, you might be a CEO, it might be a mission statement for an organization. By these things, trust me. And upon this trust, wherever you may be, should you want to interact with the way in which I'm going to try and pull you into my orbit of activity, right? You'll have to step across this chasm and then come across upon that model of trust, right? So that's the pull request of trust. That's the pull request that comes from a statement of leadership that, like I've had a company since 2001 or 2002, and I know very well what it means to try and, lead people, have people try and trust you. But I also know the fallacy of that there's no one less confident than myself, right? So the construct of trust within an honest person is like, I'm really, really not sure, but you know what? I'm sure that whatever these claims I make, I'm going to do my best, should they fail, to not have you impoverished by them. To not have your agency, your station in life, your options, your claims to want to be able to progress yourself diminished by my own failings, should these things not eventuate. I think that's true leadership, right? It's an honest intent, it's actions that work towards it, but the pull request can easily be manipulated. So I talk about this concept of trusting the language of either your mothers or your robbers. Mothers will have this trust relationship and say, trust me, tell me what you're doing on the weekend. Joey, out with your friends as a 17-year-old. Tell me, I've only got my best concern for you. Tell me what you're doing out with your friends on the weekend. Now, that doesn't give the son, Joey, like any independence. It doesn't actually cultivate the kind of agency that they require to be an independent agent, right? There is a concern, there is a duty of care there, And there is, in certain realities, like Joey's only 17, not quite 18. There's a legal formality that, you know, the mother needs to look after the kid. There's a reality to that in the way that we've constructed our social systems and other systems, right? However, trust is still the language of mothers, and it requires this pull mechanism. It's like, trust me, I'm going to look after you. Trust me, I'm going to be there for you when you fail or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
That's totally cool. But the same language is used by robbers. So the people who would say, trust me, Joey, what are you doing on the weekend? You know, if you're going out into the woods with your friends, trust me, tell me what's going on.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go out there and rob you, but trust me, you know.
They're jeopardizing this very nice idea. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the exact same situation. And we have that currently with, so this agentic future that we may have, the interoperability of agents within our information networks, right? You can think about Ellie, not the elephant, but Ellie, the employer, right? Ellie, the employer might say, trust me, I've got a great company. I've got this job position that I would like everyone in the, potentially the world, to go for. We're looking for an engineer, or we're looking for a clerk, or we're looking for a claims officer, or we're looking for a window washer, whatever it might be. Ellie puts it out there. These are the employment conditions, baseline. And today, if you come across, this is the remuneration, this is the workplace culture, this is all the kind of stuff that might be a beneficial outcome for the person that might employ, right? That might submit. But that person still has to trust Ellie. So Warwick,
absolutely,
Warwick, the worker has to do their due diligence and try and work out, is this pull request of my action, my intent, worth me investing my time to do an application for this job?
Yep.
Furthermore, if I get the job, is my time in this job?
Yep.
Is there going to be a return on my investment and things like that? And Ellie can be a mother or a robber. Ellie can say, and not even with any kind of malice, right? Ellie just might be wrong. She might be delusional. She might not have a good business plan. External conditions might break the company and say that the window washer business is no longer viable.
And the bigger the company, the less you know what happens within it. So, yeah.
And whilst you could say the same is true for Warwick, it's an asymmetrical power structure. So Warwick doesn't have all the tools of a multinational Ellie, or a Ellie that's protected by path dependencies of particular markets and whatnot. But Warwick still has to have this idea of what's their potential to negotiate agreement. So I think the model of where we have technology at the moment, and where we can use that technology to be discerning and help us create our own knowledge graph of our own self-intent and be the Warwicks, we should be able to have this push mechanism. I'm honestly looking for a job. I'm honestly skilled in these areas. I'm honestly holding this intent to work in these particular fields. And through these points of honesty, these positions of honesty, then those who want to employ Warwick should be able to then make an agreement, right? The alternate would be things like, well, there'll be an exploitative characteristic to this. So Ellie, if Ellie's running a New York law firm, it's pretty common. You might have a job application in there. You might get 3,000 applicants. They all want to work for this prestigious New York law firm. That law firm might have a practice of saying, well, let's take the top 30, give them an internship for the first 6 weeks, and then actually employ only the top 3, come out of that. It's not totally evil. You kind of might say it's for the best interests of both the law firm and those applying. Those applying might be stoked to get the opportunity to do an internship, because this prestigious firm, there's a lot of social capital in doing an internship, right? So it's not without benefit for them. But with AI, right, with this capacity for Ellie to have this asymmetric relationship with those 3,000 applicants, there's no protection for all those 3,000 people. They don't get exploited, because you can turn all 3,000 of them into some sort of internship program where the organization can actually say, well, if these 3,000 people employed, let's do some mechanical turking. Let's do some air tasking. Let's make them all do the virtual version of an internship.
Mhm.
And so they can exploit a hell of a lot of value out of 3,000 people just based on their own social capital and their own potential to negotiate a job for 3 people.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you feel that the social capital we have in the Western society, it's under threat, it's devaluing, it has a potential to, I don't know, change the form, or I know it's not exactly what he was about, but kind of this is the thought that I got when I was listening to you.
It's just the idea of a pull request. Like the pull request, like trust me, it's part of the information networks that we have at the moment. So social media influencers, they pull together a whole bunch of social capital because they have followers.
Yeah.
But where's the honesty that might be attributed to that social capital, that profile, that integrity that might sit there? If they were building their social capital over 3 years by having a particular line of honesty or influence that they can provide to folks, but then after 3 years they suddenly pivot. They take an investment from someone who wants to actually endorse a particular line of influence upon their platform. Where's the honesty?
Yeah.
So that alignment of the social capital and those who subscribe to receiving that capital into their time, into their kind of inbound information feeds and things like that, right? The kind of influence that those people might have. It's not quite a pull request, but it is very, very similar. Like they might be pushing content, but they're still pulling upon individuals who might be followers of their content to trust them. Trust that they have honest content. Trust that their content is going to be for their general benefit as a follower. Trust that they're going to remain with integrity with regard to the audience and the platform they built. And again, that kind of agreement where someone takes a whole bunch of social capital and they can amalgamate, bring it together in 80 million followers around, that should be revocable from the point of view of those who follow them. And it should be auditable and refutable from the point of their own honest platform and content that they might put out there.
Right. I'm observing firsthand how propaganda works, like modern propaganda, right? And they always talk about trust. They always say, just trust us, just trust us.
So the government departments do it all the time. Yeah, if only our citizens would trust our services more, we'd be able to deliver more effective services because we'd have more engagement rates.
Yep.
It's the wrong language.
That's fair. Steven, you had mentioned Objective Observer Initiative. I have a sense that we are coming close to this topic. So it's about agency. It's about. Please tell us what it is about, like in general first.
Yeah. It's just it's a hallucination, right? That's the best way to explain it. I don't know who's watching this or who's maybe even following all the stuff I've maybe said already, right? But imagine you've got like an AI model. An AI model is generally taking from machine learning, from data, and it's constructing this sort of like stochastic understanding of what it's been trained upon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Within that, there's this construct of like semantic entanglement. Like this construct that what a dog is, what a cat is somehow entangled within the AI model, such that when you use that AI model, it's like embeddings and vector databases and all this kind of relationship stuff, right? Mm-hmm. That model has a constructed understanding of what a dog and a cat is. And it can interoperate that with constructs like what Spanish is in English and French. And so it can do translations super easy because of these sorts of semantic entanglements. Mm-hmm. And the way you move from these entangled concepts to other concepts is this language model, right? Mm-hmm. It's how you tell a semantic linked narrative. Now, to kind of answer your question, what the Objective Observer Initiative is, I want to use like an example of what goes on in language models when a hallucination occurs, right? So a hallucination, in my view, or my very silly understanding, I'm going to be completely ignorant, and I expect I am, right? you have these entangled semantic constructs, you have this like web of influence, and you have a way of constructing a narrative. Now, the one who provides the prompt may try and, from that prompt, put themselves in a particular part of that semantic web, right? Probabilistically, there's this like comparative triggering or like location that occurs within the model. Now, just by convenience or coincidence, right? So you have like this web that has this node structure, probabilistically, quite strong, quite strong, quite strong. But then because of the prompts, you wind up kind of in the middle, the non-space, right? Within that non-space is when you get the hallucination. Because the concept of what a dog is and a cat compared to the concept of what a building might be, like what's a dog-cat building? There's something in between that. And so if your prompt is somehow in that non-space, then you start to form this concept of hallucination. And it can propagate through the model simply by that sort of like triangulation, you might think of it semantically, right?
Yeah.
I think that what we're going through as a society, right, not as a species, but as a society, within this construct of what we have as a civilization, the way we are remaining civil, the way we have like things like governments, the way we have things like market forces and things like money and things like trades, all these kind of beliefs that we have from Eastern Europeans that became Western, from 70s kids that got enamored with breakdancing in the 80s, you know, all of these things. We're going through an experience right now where we have a hallucination going on right now. The technology that we have, the constructs that we have, the society and civil institutions that we have, and this AI type capacity that we have to have an agentic web and this agentic like information network, right? But then we're people. We're people that has a very different prompt when it comes to these things. And so the Objective Observer Initiative, I've really messed this up as an explanation, right? It's something like a hallucination. It's like, what is the non-space that doesn't exist in this current discussion that's going on around AI? That's what the observer is. It's this idea that people have intent, that they can come together as a cohesive community of people and community of practice and interests, that they can actually form new structures, that they can volunteer to do what they're going to do together, that they're not actually, there's no path dependency from history that will cause them today to definitely 100% act in a particular way into the future. But in our mythos, in our sort of like archetype of how we are as people, we all feel like we're shit. We're all led by, you know, leaders. We all have to trust in the way that the world's going to be because that's the way the world's going to be. And if you ask anyone, they're all going to give you the same answer, right? But it's not true. Like, that's why I think this hallucination that we don't have agency, that we can interact with this technology, with our societies, and we can actually form a positive future that's really quite directly related to the way we want to work together, like literally perform, you know, in terms of physics, work. That action it's got nothing to do with information networks. That action, when we think about trust and we think about this pull requests, that's the lubricant for action. But it's not action. We can go straight to the source and say, what is it, Alex, you want to do today? You know, what would get you up in the morning and think about Jeff?
Yeah.
Do you want to talk to Sophia? Because, you know, you still can, despite Facebook, despite all the anchoring that we have in our learned experience about how technology supports us, enables us, and like helps us be more productive in the world, right? We can change these things just by collective action and new paradigms. So the Objective Observer is really about that. It's like, how can we observe objective reality? How can we have experiments that very much like Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, you know, can create data about the way we interact? And yet by default, that data is public. That data is actually to support new civil society, civil interactions, and civil constructs. By default, we can have these experiments that empower agency. that create a push mechanism with the way we want to act, such that we don't have to rely on the pull mechanism of trust. That's kind of what it is, and it's a lot of fun. It's something I talk about it with this idea of it's got a lot of social capital. So, in the days when we only had a broom, when a vacuum came along, you could say a vacuum has a lot of social capital because we know exactly how it's going to create value for us. And I think the objective observer, in the way that we understand what our agency is and what the power of our collective will and our action together will create for us, we understand what it can be. But just like a vacuum cleaner, you may not be quite sure how the engineering works yet. So that's the thing to wait for. That's the thing that I'm working on with others.
Sounds interesting and quite huge, right? So, have you invented any mechanism for scoping it out? I have this product thinking, right? What is the scope for this release, for that release, for next release? Do you have all scope limitations for Objectives Observer right for right now, for your activities right now? Where the ends, where the new thing starts?
Well, yes and no. So basically, when I first got triggered by this, and I thought I have to do something, and I actually realized I have the potential to do something. I started with a technical implementation, which is it got to a certain point where you have this observer. OpenData.ai is pretty much the startup authority for this. Then you have a social experience where all the phenomena that we have as individuals and collectives, like companies and organizations and jurisdictions, their statements of intent and their personas and such will be declaratively put at OpenData.ly, right? Like as a startup authority in a community of practice. The observer would observe that. But from an open source point of view, because I have a lot of experience with CKAN and like the high reciprocity and coolness of individuals that do things just because they have agency, just because they have capability, just because if not for them, who would do it, right?
Yeah.
So this concept of like the open source collaborative community is also the construct. So these three things together, observed by the observer, with this framework of experiments. So each experiment becomes this public data source. Each experiment has users or participants, I should say. Each experiment has a declarative, sort of almost like scientific method, hypothesis-led approach. And it doesn't go beyond its bounds of what it wants to do and what it's claiming it's going to do.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea is everything is like accountable to itself. So the folks that want to run an experiment, if that experiment is going to use compute, network, storage, then the folks behind it have to have the declared intent to pay for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's self-funded from that point of view of what's the value that comes from it. We're not trying to build some sort of like scale up where by capturing people's attention, we're going to manipulate and create a market for their attention and want them to all go out and buy vacuum cleaners. The intent behind an experiment is the intent. That's it. There's no engagement farming. It's literally the experiment creates data. If it creates a benefit for those who have an intent for the experiment, then they have to declare that. They should declare that. If they want to form a company and they want to have MIT license around the code base for that, then they go to the OpenData.ly and they sort of declare their intent as a collaborative around this sort of prospect as well.
Okay.
Yeah. You got me monologuing. It's all a whole lot of fun. Like I said, it's a hallucination, and I call this in my own mind. It's an art first project. All it needs to do is be a sculpture. From different perspectives, people might see it and they go, "It looks crazy. It looks dumb. It might be made of recycled stuff from the rubbish tip."
Mm.
But as a sculpture, from different perspectives, if people go, yeah, I get it. That's what social agency might be. That's how we disempower corporates.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's how we deplatform opinions from news, because we can cast a view on a particular subject without opinions.
Mm-hmm.
People have their own opinions. We can keep that to themselves. All these kind of perspectives upon which the project can be viewed. That's the purpose of it.
Mm-hmm.
If I can help people kind of like have an experience of that, I'm pretty confident that the hallucination will actually turn into a manifest reality. Like when I publish things on this, I talk about this is an emergent artifact of the Objective Observer Initiative. And I mean that kind of literally, like it's all just a fantasy. The things I'm doing right now, hopefully, if my intent, my persona is fulfilled, they will emerge into much more of a collective practice.
Okay. Thank you, Steven. You mentioned CKAN.
Yeah.
It seems that CKAN embodies some values, very certain values, beyond just being software. May I ask you about the philosophy behind CKAN?
Yeah, well, it's hard to then just jump back to CKAN after talking about all this other stuff, right? But
Yeah,
so to try and link the two.
Yeah.
One of the best things about CKAN is there's a community behind it. There's a group of people who actually really are building it. And I became one of those silly idiots, right? And I looped everyone in the company in. And now we've got a bunch of people that are joining the company because they care about CKAN and they're looped in as well.
Yeah.
That kind of path dependency, that kind of like projection of what CKAN is a powerful construct.
Mm-hmm.
But what it is a tool. Obviously, it's an open source project. Anyone can contribute into it. No one really owns it. There's no entity behind CKAN. There's no company, right? There's the Open Knowledge Foundation, which owns the trademark and the original logo and the domain name. And I think they have like root access to like the GitHub access, right? But at the end of the day, it's owned by the contributors and it's owned by the users and it's owned by intermediaries like Link Digital that try and create some sort of business model around it. Because through their actions, CKAN propagates, CKAN improves, CKAN matures. What it is as a piece of tech, though, is obviously it's a CRUD application: create, read, update, delete. It helps people organize published data sets with meaningful metadata around those data sets, and the way in which it's valuable for folks and the way it's sort of kind of embedded in our political and technical and social sort of culture, I guess, is politics. Yeah. If you're going to have an open data policy, it's very hard for governments to not say that they're going to be open or transparent. So for them to have evidence of that, they typically have something like a jurisdictional data point, all the data from different government agencies. So there's this heterogeneous collection. That provides evidence that they're open, right? From a economic point of view, if you want to have an economy that is going to support information, public information that's owned by public, taxpayers have created it, government agencies have produced it and they curate it, but you would like to you should pretty much make that a public asset, a commons asset, because that would support others to use that data for economic gains, right, in your economy. That's another reason that it's kind of like supports that as a construct, as a tool. But additionally, like this just constructs like decentralized publishing. So you've got multiple custodians from multiple organizations. There's no lock-in to the way that needs to be done. CKAN can sit in on top of different kind of information systems. So it's got this harvesting capability. Or there's the API, so you can push things into it from different information systems. It doesn't try and own all the data in the world. It's not trying to kind of create a platform that can give you all the insights from all the things for all time and forever. So it's what it is a lot of what it's not trying to be as well. And for all these reasons, there's just a community of practice, and a lot of the people involved in it, you might see from the academic point of view, you've got data scientists and data researchers. From the government point of view, you've got civic activists and you've got civic-minded bureaucrats and public sector people. From, I think, the corporate point of view, you've got some pretty cool companies and cool people, if I don't say, if I say myself, that have kind of gravitated to it, and they're building business models around it as well. So, but I think if you look at what one of the recommendations of like the European data strategy that was published, I think in like 2021, if I'm not wrong, it advised towards democratization and non-siloed data as well. So what CKAN provides is a way for people to orchestrate their own published assets and have full dominion over them, right? But yet make them interoperable, discoverable, findable, reusable with others as well. So if you're a public institute, if you're a public organization, even if you're a corporate, you can use CKAN to basically interoperate your data with others. And like a cool kind of progression from that is the croissant metadata spec, which is all about kind of providing discoverable machine learning data sets that might be tagged with testing or validation data as well, or labels, making that more discoverable and more reusable for others as well. So if you've got an organization, you've got data that's emerging through your operations, the way you interact with reality, and you're capturing that data. And that data could be used by others to train models and have a better semantic entanglement in their models around what reality might be for their models.
Yep.
All of that can be made more discoverable now with CKAN as well. So,
yeah. So CKAN is a very practical thing. It's a very real thing. Sometimes unsexy, not super modern technologies, sometimes fascinating because it powers biggest national data portals around the world. I did the stakeholders research. This is how I started. And fantastic people are gathering around the software. It fascinated me, like deeply. Different people with different motivation from different lands, like New Caledonia, I had a conversation one day, and then United States. And then someone from Switzerland and someone from Australia. Like, insane. So yeah, so CKAN is definitely huge, and it definitely invokes emotions, but also it's practical, open source, it's free to use, free to install. It doesn't have vendor lock-in. It's just such a fantastic intersection of so many things. And I deeply believe that it is so. So you're a steward for CKAN. What is the future that you see for CKAN? How it should develop, who it should serve? Should it continue its mission? Should it evolve to something else? What do you think about the future of CKAN?
Well, it's a good question. So basically, the starting point for CKAN and the future is decentralized contributions and democratized power structures, and it's just an accessible project. The technical roadmap is not for me to say. Like I might be a co-steward and I might have some influence in the project, but I am by no way responsible for the project. It's a collective responsibility and will go in whatever direction the tech team primarily think is the best way for its users to go. If I was to have more influence in it, I just can't see how I would do it from the outside. I'd have to be a coder. I think that's one of the gems of projects like this, right? You have to be involved in the core of a project to radiate out from that perspective. If there are folks that take what project is generating and they can demonstrate immense value and immense interest and immense energy, then that's the place for someone like me as a co-steward. I take what the actual devs are doing, what the engineers are building, and then I make sunshine out of that, and everyone sees just how bright it is, right? Through that, I might have influence, but largely, yeah, not so much influence. Having said that, I do see, I guess, the sunshine in different facets or different aspects of it. So one of my jobs as a co-steward is really to promote it. Others might not quite see its benefits and how it complements an organization that might otherwise choose a closed source system or might otherwise choose a system that's not necessarily directly driving towards this, open source, high reciprocity AGPL3 type model of building tech within a community that cares about building tech.
Okay. Steven, what excites you most about the future of data governance, data management, open data? I'm
Um,
up the conversation, so something.
yeah, well, it's not so much the data that excites me, and the data is amazing. I've always had like this close, I don't know, like this granular understanding that that's the fabric of reality, right? The way in which we bump up against something is a point, is an event, a space-time event, right? That's data.
It is.
Every interaction that we have is pretty much a data point or a space-time point, right? An event. Now, one of the things I'm most excited about it, I guess, I'm not like a big fanboy evangelist for AI. Like I said, I've already called it. It's no different than wood. You can make whatever you want out of it. It's just a new sort of like it's a new constructive framework that we can use. However, as something we can construct things with, we can make things that are very, very close to the skin. So what excites me about data and how we can use data, it's the new technologies that can probabilistically understand our own knowledge graph, our own statement of intent, and our own ways of interoperating with others, right? So it's this construct of what data is for us. It's not so much the quantified self, right? It's more of the knowledge self or the mindful self. We spend a lot of time, and I think there's a lot of industry sort of intent around mindfulness practices and making ourselves kind of like this second version of ourselves where we can observe ourselves and like literally be mindful of what we're doing. But it's really hard, right?
Yeah.
And then there's other facet of life that's kind of popular around this concept of us being like extremely awesome at things, whether it's at the gym or really awesome at being smart and learning in particular fields. And the reality is most of the time we're pretty stupid. And most of the time we have to operate on that level of being pretty stupid, pretty much driven by our heuristic biases, pretty much driven by our hunger, our fatigue, and all these kind of things. No matter how much we want to ascend to the heights of our potential, we're pretty much running around, 13%.
That's really well put.
So I think one of the things that this fabric that AI might be is a very close skin, a very much a technology that can embrace us in such a way that we can push back on it and we can say, this is the way we want to represent ourselves. This is the way we want to clothe ourselves with technology, and this is the way we want to operate with the world. We may not be the smartest, we may not be the brightest, we may not be the most powerful people in any context, but we can have a clear signal about what it is we want and how we might get it with technology at the moment. So it might come through this like granular understanding of what data is, and these data points, this space-time, this semantic entanglement, all this kind of stuff, right? But the reality is it becomes a point of impenetrable armor for us to be who we want to be and how we want to be and what we're going to do with that in the world. I think that's what's exciting.
Thank you, Steven. Fantastic conversation. I was absolutely sure it would be like this. I hope it's not the last time we're meeting. Any final words you would like to say, or we're wrapping up and just meeting with you next time? What would you prefer?
No, I mean, like I know, like we used to meet every week talking about CKAN stuff, so I know that we've talked about there's a long journey with any of this stuff. A lot of it is social engineering, it's human engineering. It's about believing in yourself, believing in a community, a practice. I think the time right now is about one to many. Belief needs to become something that's quite permanent in our social cohesion. We need to believe in the power of our own intent and our way of like being involved in the world. Otherwise, the signal will come from others. The construct of what we are as individuals and what we might have as potentials in the world will come from the probabilistic external construct of what folks think we're possible of doing, right?
Yeah.
So last time we had a beer together was in Tallinn at the Open Government Partnership. I intend we should do that again sometime. Maybe not in Tallinn, but wherever the next one is. Maybe in Spain. I think that's right. That's where it is.
I do agree, and it was quite enlightening, and I don't know, everything was like top notch. I don't know. Thank you very much, Steven, um, for joining Tuesday Talks. If you'd like to learn more, and basically, if you're watching us, if you're still watching us, we need your feedback. What you liked, what you don't like, what things you would like to hear more about, because we have a lot of stuff to talk about, and kind of we can take different stances and look about a bit different things in different contexts. So feedback is super essential for the next episodes. Please, one sentence, two sentences, short paragraphs, or unload everything you have. Just don't be, yeah, we're super open and we're very welcoming. If you'd like to learn more about CKAN, about Link Digital projects and how it can help solving your data challenges, visit linkdigital.com AU. AU is for Australia. Thank you very much, Steven. See you.
Thanks, Alex. Ciao, 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 ciao. Bye.